Hey guys, today I'm looking at EA's Dante's Inferno, the game. Wow. This is a very interesting game to me. It basically is, at first glance, basically a ripoff of God of War. You have your light attack, your heavy attack. It's even though it's a ripoff, it's still a very well-made game, and again, it really got me interested because it was like, oh, this is based on like an ancient piece of literature. So it is kind of the same kind of genre or style, the same kind of genre and style as God of War, where you're this ancient mythological figure. You're going to the underworld and you're basically deciding to follow Beatrice into the underworld, but now they give you a big ass scythe and it turns into an action game. So I just found this whole experience to be very, very cool and very interesting how they approached it. But yeah, it is basically God of War clones. So again, one thing I really love about this game is the cross ability. You can shoot out a beam of light or a cross of light, really. And it has this super cool effect and sound and this really cool, I don't know how to describe it. It's this sound effect and this really cool like vibration. Like you really feel it in terms of projectiles. The cross of light in this game is actually one of my favorites ever in terms of melee combat. And so through Dante's Inferno, similar to the actual book itself, you go through the different stages of hell from, lust, gluttony, avarice, wrath, heresy, violence, fraud, and finally betrayal. And so you also have Virgil, who is your guide and acts as kind of the tutorial guide and also the explanation for, what you see in front of you. And Dante is basically very ripped dude who participated in the Crusades and returns home to Italy to find essentially Beatrice has been slain and her soul is being taken down to hell. And so he ventures down to hell to save her soul and resurrect her or bring her back to heaven and absolve her. There's not much else to say about this game. Like the camera angles, the dialogue, the pacing, the combat, everything is just God of War, which honestly is fine. And even for a God of War ripoff, I thought this was done fairly well and fairly decently. I honestly am not a huge fan of the God of War series of games. I never really appealed to their combat, even though a lot of other games that are based on them, like that reference them, like Nier, are games I absolutely love, and I don't even feel the same kind of combat in those games, but apparently they're borrowed from this one. And so the one main mechanic they have in this game is you can absolve or condemn people. And so you'll have certain NPCs you come across who tell their story, or certain bosses where you can decide to, show forgiveness and absolve them into heaven, or condemn them and let them remain in hell. And so it's really cool how they do this intro. I mean, as someone who's read the book itself, it's funny that Dante starts off in a forest and he's wandering around until he's called by Beatrice. But this one, they kind of have a whole action sequence, and Dante's villa basically is destroyed, and a giant crack in the ground opens up, and he basically falls down into hell and meets Virgil and begins his journey to slaughter all these demons with his... I do love his weapon. It's this weird retractable scythe thing, so it's like has that Grim Reaper vibe, but also this holy magic power. I really like the design of the character as well, how he has kind of like his armor is built into his body, there's a cross stitched into his chest. It's a really cool design. I just wish that I liked this game more. Again, I'm not really a fan of the God of War style of gameplay, and it's very much whatever. Of course, just like God of War, as you upgrade your character, Dante, throughout the scope of the game, he gets different kinds of power-ups and upgrades, and different things like that increase the strength of attacks, new attacks, different combos, and all that good stuff. Also, you have your weaker enemies, which you're able to grab and do kind of combos on, and the stronger enemies, once you do enough damage, it will show up you know, this prompt essentially to essentially again do a quick time action sequence similar to God of War, and then again part of that is absolving and condemning them in the combat itself. And so when you get certain points to condemnation and holiness, it'll also increase your skill tree, and it can determine what kind of skills you can give Dante and what kind of upgrades you can do. And so part of the story is that, you know, Beatrice is kind of sacrificing herself for Dante because while on the Crusades, he did and committed all these sins. And so now in his place, she's taken kind of his place in hell. And he feels super guilty about this, and, you know, doesn't want to condemn her. And so that's why he's going through hell to save her from, you know, the devil basically and Satan. There's very cool segments in this game, like, you know, boiling lakes of blood, you know, all the things from the book more or less represented in this extremely intense and crazy thing. I remember something that was really kind of stupid / crazy in Limbo. They had all the unbaptized babies that acted as these little like demon things that came at you, and I found that to be very funny for a controversial topic. They turned it into an enemy type, and a lot of the demons are kind of the, you know, the typical like Baphomets and goat horns and, you know, giant things. And you know, the dialogue in this game is very much also equivalent to God of War. He just gets angry, yells at people, and talks about his convictions and moves on with his journey. You know, he's not as angry as Kratos, obviously, but he still has, you know, I guess the right kind of attitude to, you know, to serve up you know, pain and punishment. One thing I really remember about the release of this game is really that kind of clued me into how scummy EA was, and just how messed up their marketing was. Is that part of the marketing for this game was that they had a bunch of quote unquote Christian fundamentalists protesting outside the EA offices about the release of this game and how it's unholy. And it turns out that all those people were paid actors. I just found it really interesting / a little bit disturbing that we live in an age of what I would call a, you know, kind of a Edward Bernays kind of future, where you can't tell what is news, what is real, and what is marketing, and they're all one and the same kind of. And the fact that EA would pay fake protesters to protest their game is just some kind of 4D chess move that at the time really surprised me. And again, while the game is not super poetic, what is really cool and nice that they included is in the special extras and options menu, they actually have the entirety of Dante's Inferno in script. So you can actually read the entire book in the game itself, which I do think is a really nice kind of extra thing that they added. And if you do want to read the Divine Comedy, it's also both online for free and also apparently in this video game. So there's definitely multiple ways to, you know, experience it, and you don't need to buy a book or anything. Of course, if you're wondering, in the book, Dante basically never does any combat or fights. It does just kind of going through the scenes and seeing, you know, what has become of some of his people in real life and his peers and whatnot, and just documenting every sin and whatever. The Divine Comedy itself, for reference, is not just Inferno and Hell, it's also Purgatory and Heaven, but the first book that everyone kind of reads and gets the most kicks out of is Inferno. And in terms of how faithful the game is to the book, I can't really say. I mean, it takes a lot of liberties. I think they do something with Gluttony where it's a 3-headed dog, and Cerberus is in, like, a lot of people think Cerberus guards the gates to the underworld, but no, he's actually just guarding the gates to Gluttony. And so, and he's just like depicted as a little dog, at least in the book, but with 3 heads. And I think they tried to do something where they had multiple mouths on this giant monster. So again, they added in characters and bosses that are not here. So they took a lot of liberty. So don't go thinking a lot of this stuff is in the book, because it's not. They literally were like, okay, let's look at God of War and do that, basically. But yeah, there's, you know, this game is very okay. Again, there's nothing about it that really stands out. There's anything super duper amazing about it. It's just generally very okay and all around all right. And as someone who like read the book, I thought I'd get more enjoyment out of this, but I just don't like the God of War series and the God of War games, and it was all just very okay to me, you know? Of course, there are some platforming puzzles and other things you need to solve, but it's mostly, climbing around things, focusing on combat, using your cross powers. It's kind of feels a little bit repetitive by the end of the game, and when you finally kind of fight the devil, it's kind of sort of feels rushed and abrupt. And then you have the final cutscene where Dante steps out into the light and into the shores of Mount Purgatory, and that's kind of where the game ends. So, I mean, honestly, not a bad try for an adaptation of a classical piece of literature, and by ripping off another very famous game of the same style. But yeah, I kind of wish it was just more than what it is. It's kind of very okay, and I think that's all I can really say about it. Anyway, guys, I'll see you later. Bye.